Welcome back into the Tide Talk podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Stacey Blackwood here, joined by Jake Thomas. Jake, how's it going, buddy?
Going good, man. Glad good to be back, and got a new little setup here. So we're going to try this out and see how it rolls.
Yeah, for those of you watching us on YouTube now, we are now on YouTube. So just another way for you to connect with us here at the Tide Talk podcast, and we're going to get things started here in just a minute. But of course, I got to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline.ag. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. The NHL playoffs are in full swing. Major League Baseball is going on right now. There's soccer. Of course, The Bachelorette's on if reality TV is something you want to bet on. So just head on over to betonline.ag and make sure you tell them that the Tide Talk podcast sent you from the Believe Podcast Network, and sign up today and you'll receive that 50% welcome bonus. betonline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Jake, here in this first segment, we're going to talk about something that's not really just about Alabama, but it kind of involves Alabama, and that's the rumors of the college football playoff expansion. And the rumor is now that there's going to be expanded to 12 teams. Just kind of your initial thoughts on the college football playoff expansion possibilities.
I think it's a terrible idea, to be honest. In all actuality, really, the top four teams are probably, 1 through 4 is going to be in it every year. And I've heard people say, well, there's always a Cinderella in basketball. This ain't basketball. This is football. And the talent spread, most of the time, now there have been some major upsets, and I'm not going to say there hasn't been, but, you're pretty much clicking on all cylinders when you get to the playoffs. And so I don't see how, in any 12 versus 1 or 10 versus 3, however they play, I don't see how anybody's going to beat 1 through 4, and it's always going to be that 1 through 4, just in my honest opinion.
Yeah, I've said the same thing for really ever since the college football playoff has kind of been incorporated into college football. You only have a couple teams, maybe 4 to 5 at the max every year, that you can really say has a legitimate chance to win the championship. So expanding to 12 to me is just I don't understand. Well, I do understand it. They want more money. I mean, that's what it's about. But I don't get the part of making it. It creates parity. I don't believe that. They thought that the transfer rule was going to create parity, and all that did was allow Alabama to go out and get, arguably the best inside linebacker in college football on their team that they didn't have before, and also a 4-star wide receiver from Ohio State. So they make all these rules, and then they have these unintended consequences. And expanding the playoffs is, to me, not even looking at the purity of the sport and what separates college football from other sports. Just the unintended consequences are bad enough.
Absolutely. And there was an article put out the other day from sports.yahoo.com. And what they did was they pretty much had like a little put together of the 12-team playoff from last year, if there was a 12-team playoff. Listen to some of these matchups. Number 12, Coastal Carolina at number 4, Notre Dame. Talk about it. Personal opinion, that's a snooze fest. Notre Dame walks all over Coastal Carolina.
First of all, who wants to watch that?
Right, exactly. And Indiana, number 11, Indiana at number 5, Texas A&M. To me,
beat down.
Another beat down. Now Georgia at Cincinnati, number 9 versus number 8. That potentially could be a good game.
But we saw that game in the Peach Bowl, Jake.
I know.
Georgia played with like half of their team and still won.
Exactly. You get
right.
Which in turn, if all those teams that the ranked higher teams went on, this is who Cincinnati be playing. Number 1 Alabama, beat down,
stomping.
Yeah. Clemson, number 2 Clemson versus Florida.
Clemson stomping Florida.
Yeah, I agree with that. Ohio State versus A&M, that might be a
Okay.
pretty good game.
Yep,
But
you get a good game there.
yep,
Well, Jack, the truth is, and we talked about it
yeah,
last year, A&M probably should have got in over Notre Dame. I
I
didn't really
agree.
have a problem with Notre Dame getting in,
Hmm.
but you could have flip flopped those two teams, and it. I think I'm with you. That would have been a heck of a game between Ohio State and Texas A&M.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the last was Oklahoma versus Notre Dame. So, I mean,
Oklahoma would destroy Notre Dame.
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the matchups. I mean, nobody wants to see Alabama versus Coastal Carolina. I'm sorry.
No,
I mean, that's a beatdown all day, every day. Honestly, nobody wants to see Alabama versus Cincinnati, too. That's a beatdown all day. I mean, so like we said, 4 teams is good enough. And I mean, if they want to expand it to 8, maybe, but 12, come on, give me a break.
well, I mean, like I said, there's only a couple teams every year that are legitimate contenders to
Mm-hmm.
win the whole thing. Last year, that was Alabama and Ohio State, and we saw what Alabama did to Ohio State. Now, I will
Right.
say this: towards the end of the season, Oklahoma was playing as well as anybody else in the country.
Yeah,
Uh, uh, but to me, the two best teams in the country last year are the two teams who play for the championship. So
absolutely.
I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. If I was making the decisions, I would go back to the BCS.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I would get if you wanted to keep the playoff, keep the playoff. Just let the BCS formula come up with the 4 teams because this whole committee thing's a joke anyway. I mean, and we've talked about that before. It's just it's a joke. It's a political game. So I personally, let's just go back to the BCS formula.
hey, I'm fine with that. I was going to say on that point, I think it was like 2012 when we played LSU again in the national championship game. The first game was back and forth, neck and neck. That second game, Alabama rolled away with it. So, those, in my opinion, were the two best teams. Alabama lost the first matchup. LSU, I think, ran the table until that game. Alabama wiped them off the field the second game. So, I mean, the BCS always had the two best teams in there, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
No
so
question about it. No question
yeah.
about it. And what I'm about to say is going to piss off every other fan base in the country,
So what?
besides the handful that I'm going to mention. But we've been playing, college football for well over 100 years, and they've decided the champion several different ways, trying to make it, easier or to grow the parity in the game for over 100 years now. But you know
Right.
what? The same few teams win the national championship every year. It's either going to be Alabama, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Ohio State. It's going to be one of those teams 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
Back
Yeah.
in the day, USC. But what I'm saying is we're doing all these changes, and you know who's going to benefit the most? The same teams that have been winning for the last 100 years.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
mean, it's the way it is. We can't stop this train. It's rolling. They're going to go to 12 teams,
Yeah.
but it's a joke. I mean, it's all about the money. They're trying to satisfy these teams like Cincinnati and Boise State and Central Florida, uh, who the only people who care about are their fan bases. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I'm an Alabama fan, but I care what happens at Ohio State. I care what happens at Clemson. I care
Mhm.
what happens at Texas A&M. I care what
Right.
happens at LSU. I don't give a rat's. You know what happens at Coastal Carolina.
Right. They had a dream season, but still, there wasn't no match for the top teams
Yeah, I
whatsoever.
mean, well, and like I said, I know that's going to piss some people off, but and I sound like an arrogant Alabama fan, and maybe I am being, but I mean, come on. The truth is, Alabama fans care about their school and the other big dogs. They really don't care what's going on at Cincinnati or Coastal Carolina or Central Florida. I mean, it's just the
Right.
truth.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But we can save that for another day. We've kind of talked about this for a minute. Our next subject, Jake, is kind of wrapped up in this as well,
Hmm.
and it's should Notre Dame join a conference? Is it time for Notre Dame to join a conference? What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, they always talk about, hey, we're getting ripped because we have an undefeated season. but yet the Power Fives who get in have a conference championship, and we don't, and it's not fair that, well, sorry, get it in a conference, win that conference championship, and you might get put in over a Big 12 team or whoever, or a Big 10 team, whoever. But you got to get yourself in a discussion, and not being in a conference really, waters that down, in my opinion. So.
Well, and what made me think of this today was listening to the J-Boy show, and he was talking about how they needed to join a conference. And, we've been saying it for years on our podcast that they need to do it. But it just kind of planted that seed again. And, the last couple of years they've been playing an ACC heavy schedule. And to your point, what you mentioned about getting in over some of these other teams, beating Clemson last year is the only reason they got in. Jake,
Right.
if they didn't have Clemson scheduled last year and they beat somebody else, outside of, just randomly, let's just say Bowling Green. I mean, just a random team, but they do go undefeated. You know who gets in over Notre Dame? Texas A&M.
Right.
So to your point, beating that ACC team because they're playing that ACC heavy schedule, that benefited them. So joining a conference is going to benefit them when it comes to the college football playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about A&M getting in over Notre Dame, if that were to happen, Alabama beat Notre Dame by 30 or by A&M by 30 points, 24, 30 points like that. So
something like that, yeah.
I mean, so again, get in a conference and go out there and beat Clemson every year. If you want to prove that, okay, we're Notre Dame, we're back, beat Notre Dame every year in the conference championship game, in the ACC conference championship game. If you're going to play the schedule already, an ACC heavy schedule, get in the conference. Come on now. I think the basketball teams already jumped ship over to the ACC conference. So football team do.
Well, once again, this goes back to money. They have that TV deal with NBC, and that's the only thing holding it up, I'm sure. But I've talked about how it would benefit them when it comes to the college football playoff by joining a conference. Shoot, we go to 12, they're going to be in regardless.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
because they have an easy schedule.
Well, and it's not. I don't even really have a problem with their schedule. I mean, schedules are what they are. I mean, most of the time. I mean, you see Alabama scheduling teams out 10 years from now. I mean, there's no way of knowing how good that team's going to be 10 years. I mean, you know what I mean? So, schedules to me, are a little bit overrated. I mean, it's too much of a factor, especially when you're looking at it from the preseason point of view. Of course, you can go back after the season and look at it and who they play, but going into the preseason, I hate looking at schedules and saying, "Oh, this team's got the hardest schedule." How the hell do you know?
Right.
I mean, but that's a story for another day as well. But the college football playoff thing with Notre Dame, and we kind of should have touched on this before we, switched over to Notre Dame. But you're going to see teams with 3 losses getting in the playoff. It's going to happen.
That's ridiculous. I'm sorry.
You know what's going to be hilarious is Alabama for some reason has a down year, and they lose. Let's just say they lose 3 games.
Yep.
And then they get that 12th and final spot in the playoffs, and then they run the table and win the national championship.
Yep.
You know how pissed off people are going to be because of that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it didn't help. We're going back to the college football playoff just mentioned now, but it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't benefit anybody except the top guys. The Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, those guys right there, because they're going to be in the top 4, top 5 every year.
Yeah, so. but the Notre Dame joining the conference, it's time.
Yes,
it's time to stop living in the past. Being an independent is no longer, what it used to be. They need to join a conference. Just join the ACC like your basketball program has and your other sports. Just go ahead and do it. You done it last year. I mean, and I know that was because of COVID, but just join it. Get it out. I mean, when this NBC deal's up, I don't know when that is. I hadn't looked.
Either.
But they need to join a conference. That's just how it needs to be.
Dude.
And yeah, and real quick before we move on to our next segment, I do want to give a shout out to our friend Hunter Letson at WD Marketing Group. This is kind of a free little ad for him, but he's starting to sell like little badges, game day badges, for people there in Tuscaloosa. So I think it's redbubble.com. Is that where it's at, Jake?
I believe so.
Where you can buy it. Hunter shared all that. Y'all all follow him on Twitter at Hunter Letson, and you'll see where he has posted all that stuff. I just wanted to give him a quick shout out. He's a friend and buddy, and we just, he's got that marketing firm. We want to make sure that he, gets his proper due from the rest of Alabama faithful. But all right, Jake. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about, kind of what we have planned moving forward with the podcast as we here in the dog days of summer. Still several weeks until they report for fall camp. But Jake, we're going to do a little bit, what we done last summer. Last summer we had our first ever kind of Tide Talk draft where we each selected 11 offensive players and 11 defensive players from the current Alabama roster to kind of pin each other up against each other to see who would come out on top. So we're going to do that again here this summer, coming up pretty soon. And then also we're going to be, revisiting our top 5 Saban players at each position. We've done that a couple summers ago, and I think it's time. We've had a lot of great players come through since then. So I think it's a good time to kind of revisit that as well.
Absolutely. And I had fun doing both of them. Of course, whenever I picked my team last summer, I went young guys. Of course, I've always, as you know, everybody listens to us. I'm heavy on Trey, and so I picked him, and Bryce Young. So now this year, Bryce, and then you got Paul Tyson, and then either Jalen Millow. So Alabama's talented, so this is going to be fun. And then revisiting the top 5 players at each position, I had fun doing that too because, I forget about some of the greats that's come through since Saban's been there. And it's not because, it's just we forgot about it. It's just so many comes through at every position. You just like, oh my gosh, I forgot. Just like Jake Coker, he was one of my favorite players, quarterbacks. So, you just forget about guys like that. And Blake Sims for another guy, So, there's so much talent that comes through, it rolls through Tuscaloosa, and it's incredible. So that's going to be fun as well.
I think I figured out what's happened to Trey Sanders. Going into his freshman season, he's got that old Jake curse on him right now. Going into his freshman year, Jake predicted that he would win the Heisman Trophy.
Sorry, Trey.
Then he gets hurt in fall camp. He never sees the field as a true freshman. Then last season, Jake picks him there as a starting running back.
Yeah.
And then he has that, that car crash that hurts him and makes him sit out the rest of the season. So I think Jake has cursed Trey Sanders.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Trey. I was driving your bandwagon, and the wheels come off real quick. I don't even driving anything.
Heavy load.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, go ahead if you're gonna say something.
No, that's absolutely true. I've been high on the kid since he's been down there, and unfortunately, he just hadn't been able to step on the field yet. But man, there's always this year, so we'll see.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of running backs, did you see J Boy's top 5 SEC running back units today?
Was Alabama 3rd, I think?
I think 4th. I think they're
4th. Yeah.
I really don't have a problem with his list because
I don't either.
Alabama don't really have anybody that's just proven.
No.
Obviously we know they're all talented, but
right. Brian Robinson's, he can be proven. He's got to prove it this year. Yeah. And he's had some decent games running the ball, but he's probably going to be the guy this year. So it's step up. Times for him to step up, but we're loaded down there at running back.
Yeah, I'm excited about that group. Yeah, they're. Yeah. And speaking of the J Boy, did you see how many South Carolina fans were coming after him because their running back group was not in the top 5? Look, Now they're starting running back Kevin Harris. He's a dude. I
Yeah,
mean, he's a
he
good
is.
player. But Jake, I could not name one other running back on their team.
I don't keep up with South Carolina, so I wouldn't know. I mean, I didn't know Harris. So, but
Well, he was
yeah,
he's a good running back. I think he led the
yeah.
conference in rushing yards.
Wow.
I mean, he was probably behind Najee, but Najee played more games.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but he's a really good player. But after that, I mean, I think they got a freshman that they're excited about. But Alabama's got like 6 of those.
Yeah. Yeah. At every position.
Right.
So,
Anyway, all right, real quick, guys. Make sure y'all head over to betonline.ag to place those bets. Parlays. They have that online casino that's open 24/7. You can play blackjack, poker, all that fun stuff, and make your reality TV bets, your sports bet, your prop bets, your pleasers, your teasers, all those at betonline.ag. Then also make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts. Leave us that 5-star written review. You can also follow the podcast on Amazon Music, Spotify, Stitcher. We're on all the major podcast platforms, and now we're on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the Tide Talk podcast on the YouTube channel right here. All right, Jake, we're going to head out now. Make sure you follow our podcast on Twitter at Tide Talk Pod. You can follow me at Blackwood89.
I'm at Jake Thomas TTS.
All right, guys. Well, y'all have a great evening and roll Tide.
Roll Tide.